Hey there, super friends. This is Joey with Last Point Gaming. Today is Thursday, January 25th, 2018. If you want to connect with us on social media, you can subscribe to our Last Point Gaming channel on YouTube. There are channels there. You can friend up our Last Point Gaming Facebook account. You can follow us on Twitter at Last Point Gaming. You can follow me personally on Twitter at Stranger Sparrow, or you can always reach out directly with an email to lastpointgaming@gmail.com. All right. So, I'm going to talk about the standard deck I settled on, I think, for now. And then I was listening to some story time with Jody Keith today. If you haven't checked out his YouTube, it looks like he's got like other kinds of videos there. I haven't checked them out, but his story time videos are great. He came on my radar because he had teamed up with, well, initially when he popped up on my radar, he was teamed with Tom Ross, Todd Stevens for Team Open. And if you haven't been with me very long, you may not realize Tom Ross was like my MTG hero. The man who built most of his career off of playing aggro archetype and just doing it amazingly. He was my go-to person when format rotated to, like, so what's your read on the format, Tom? And unfortunately, he is gone from the competitive arena now, but fortunately, it's because he's with the play and design team with WotC now. So hopefully, even though I'm going to be missing out on all that great content from him that, like, helped me get my bearings for the season, hopefully him working with that team will translate into some of the mistakes we've had, like, energy not happening again. Or at least having the counterbalance required to make them balanced mechanics. Again, I'm not saying energy in and of itself was a mistake. They just failed to balance it. That's all. I've been following Jody Keith on Twitter since around that time, and then, he started sharing those links out on Twitter for his storytime videos on his YouTube, and they're pretty fun to listen to. I wouldn't call him an edgelord. Apparently Todd Anderson now thinks he's an edgelord, or is worried that he's an edgelord. I wouldn't call either of these guys edgelords because they don't, go out of their way to rabble-rouse. They're just not 100% PC in that they're kind of like me. Todd is definitely more cautious in how he expresses his opinion, and a big part of that is likely his sponsorship from Star City Games. Or his employment with them. I don't know how that works. I don't know if they're contract employees or if they're W-2 from Star City Games. But in any case, because of his affiliation there and not wanting to lose that, it does make a lot of sense that he is more cautious in the opinions he expresses and how he expresses himself. Because if he's not, he could end up getting cut loose from SCG. Jody is a little closer to me than Todd, maybe even a little further than me, as far as you don't have to worry about watching ads during his videos. Actually, I don't think he has enough followers to be part of the ad program thing where you get to add ads to your videos. But even if you were, I'm not sure he's advertiser friendly. He talks like a sailor, and he's not that calm, collected, and let me tell you about this thing. He's and then this motherfucker, let me tell you this. But he's fun to listen to. He's got some great stories, and of course is, one of the high competitive grinders. Anyway, so there's something that he was talking about from the Dallas Team Open that I kind of want to talk about. But, so who won out of Pirates and Vampires? For now, Pirates have won. This is solely because I need less than $15 in cards to finish Pirates, whereas I need almost 40 to finish Vampires. And being that a handful of those cards are in Boo's Vampire deck, and I don't know that she's going to stay on that deck, I would rather not buy the cards, have her move off to a different deck, and be like, great. Now I don't need these extra Danto Vanguards and Legion's Landings and that kind of thing. Because let's face it, nobody's playing Legion Landing in Modern. Ain't happening. I don't think a Danto Vanguard is going to be played in any of the extended formats either. So, I'm sorry, they're not extended. Modern's not an Eternal format. People refer to it as one, but it's not. It's a non-rotating format, and then you have the Eternal formats being Legacy and Vintage. But there's no umbrella term for all of them. So, I generally refer to them as the extended formats. But anyway, neither here nor there. So I'm going to build Pirates for this week and give it a run, see how it does. And then probably actually spend some time doing things at the kitchen table, having Boo play against it, and then having her play the Pirates deck against me playing the Monument deck. Pirates might be more her speed, because it is just deploy creatures and do damage. Like, that's what you do. There aren't as many triggers to watch out for, because, man, yeah, Vampire Monument, there's a lot that goes on with that deck. So that's where I came down there. All I need for that deck, I do need one unclaimed territory. I did find a third not-in-use unclaimed territory. Of course, I have 4 in my Modern Humans deck, but I don't want to take them out. Because I don't want to double sleeve a whole standard deck, and I don't want to have to double sleeve them again. That's where that's at. So I'd rather just have the 8 copies. And we have 7. The 4 that are in the deck, and then I have found 3 more for a tribal standard deck. You know, those things are up to almost $5 a piece. It is an uncommon from a set still easily accessible and in fact still actively being played in limited. What? What? Oh my god. Just mind-blowing. And it's played in all of one deck in Modern. What? Because like decks like Merfolk and Elves really don't want for it. Merfolk is, I guess now it's green-blue, used to be mono-blue, and Elves is either white-green or black-green. I think I've seen a black-green deck pop up. I could be wrong. Personally, I think black-green's the way to go with Elves. Because you still have access to good removal spells like Fatal Push, Doomblade. Everybody talks about, like, oh, this thing dies to Doomblade, that's why it's bad. Except nobody plays Doomblade. But you have good removal in black, and that also opens up Shaman of the Pack. Though if you're running Cavern of Souls and Collected Company, I think even in the white-green build, you could throw in Shaman of the Pack. Maybe I'm overestimating the usefulness of Shaman of the Pack. That is entirely possible. But, like, I look at that deck and I'm like, you know what you need this turn? Because you can't swing. You need a damn Shaman of the Pack. You'd win. Why don't you have Shaman of the Pack? Anyway, because those decks aren't so deep in colors, they don't need the additional mana fixing land, so they'll run Cavern of Souls because the uncounterable on Cavern of Souls is fantastic. That is what you want the most out of the Cavern of Souls in those decks in Modern. To the point, like, at one point I was working on building Modern Elves, and I didn't have Caverns. I was like, fuck it, I don't really need them. Because in Elves, there are so few specific elf spells that you're like, oh, this one has to resolve or I'm boned. like, most of your values off your Cocos, which you can't cast as uncounterable off the Cavern of Souls anyway. But the control depth is much bigger in Modern. So the uncounterable on the Cavern of Souls is really the selling point. As far as the mana fixing, in a 2-color deck, especially decks where you run a lot more just spells, that you're not going to be able to make colored mana off of it for, Now, 5-color humans, that's a different story. You need to spread all 5 colors. And that's why you need 12 lands that can tap for any color to play a human. It's like the old 4-color human deck was mostly green-white. The only non-creature spells it ran were Path to Exile and Collected Company. So most of the mana, all the mana could produce either or both green and white. But like, some of them ran like 1 Overgrown Tomb or 1 Hallowed Fountain, so that if you had to hard cast your, say, Reflector Mage on turn 3 and hadn't gotten a Cavern out yet, you could do it. But with, I think Overgrown Tomb was the one you saw more often, just because you had Noble Hierarch in that deck, which makes Bant mana. So you could cast a Reflector Mage off of that. Whereas you couldn't cast a Sin Collector or a Campbell off of anything but the Cavern of Souls or grabbing it with a Coco without the addition of an Overgrown Tomb. So, yeah, that deck still spread 4 colors, but it was mostly green-white, and, and I think that's why you never really saw that deck on the top of any Modern tournament. And I think that's why the Vile Human version is much more consistent in being able to deploy all of its threats between Aether Vial and the fact that 12 of your, is it 20 lands? Yeah, I think it's 20. 12 of your 20 lands can cast all your creatures. And Aether Vial, really, there's only 4 lands you can't cast it off of in that deck. But that's also why it doesn't run anything but lands, Aether Vials, and creatures. It can't run Path to Exile because it can't depend on having white mana. It can't run Collected Company because it can't depend on having green mana. Anyway, all that said and done. So unclaimed territories are almost $5. So that is like actually the second most expensive card I need. We apparently have 0 Vraska's Contempts. What the fuck's up with that? How do I not have a single Vraska's Contempt? So I gotta buy 2 of those, which are about $6 a piece. And then there's like 3 of an uncommon from Rivals that I need that are like 10 cents a piece. And there's 1 of a common or uncommon that I need. Yeah, that's 10 cents a piece. I was excited to find I actually do have 2 Dire Fleet Neckbreakers, so I don't need to pick up any of those because the deck only runs 2. Still kind of wondering why there's no Forerunner of the Coalition. Maybe that, I guess its strategy is a little bit different. Like, vampires, you can build an aggressive build, but you still want the Forerunner of the Legion because you're running so few of those top-end cards. And vampires takes a little bit to set up, even the lower, more aggressive version. Whereas pirates are like most aggro decks. Just deploy threats and break in for damage. Which decks like that are great in formats where the majority of the removal being run is spot removal. Because when you're 1-for-1ing on at most a 2-2, that's great. I have this super wide board state and I don't even care. Go ahead. But there are a couple mass removal cards that you gotta be careful of, like Sweltering Suns is pretty rough on that deck. Fumigate, of course, you got nothing to protect against that or to even stop the life gain. That's my only, why I think vampires may be better, is to be able to put Yahenni on the battlefield just so he can eat all your stuff in the contingency of a Fumigate just to prevent the life gain. Because that's where Fumigate really bones aggro decks. Again, it's kind of like Approach of the Second Sun. 7 cost sorcery spell, where it's like, well, I'm probably going to win next turn, so good luck. Not that bad. Most aggro decks go, alright, so what you're telling me is I have 1 turn. The gaining 7 life is usually what hurts the most off of that, because, you've worked them down and everything, and they're going to die to your next swing, except that 7 life puts them just outside of that. So you gotta hope to top deck something to do just that couple extra points of damage. Oh, it's rough, man. It's rough. I mean, of course, there's still Settle the Wreckage. But I think more and more people are finding out that spell's not actually that great. Especially in any deck. Well, against any aggressive deck that has some kind of card draw engine. Like Ruin Raider, like Arguel's Bloodfest. There's one of in the sideboard. I'm not sure how I feel about that. I've gone on this rant before about one-ofs in your 75. In decks that don't draw a lot, or tutor, or manipulate the deck in some way to help you get that one card when you need it, having a one-of in your 75 just seems not good. Where, if you're siding that in, and you're like, man, I really need that in this match, you have no way to go find it. You just gotta hope. And I feel like that warrants it being at least a 2-of, but I also don't know what I would cut out of the sideboard to make room for it. The sideboard of that deck, I really want to look pretty hard at it, because it feels kind of sketchy. It's got 4 Duresses. Does it need 4 Duresses, especially as you already run 4 Kite Sail freebooters? I mean, I get it. Duress, just chucks the card in the graveyard, whereas freebooter, you're still vulnerable to removal on freebooter for them to get it back. But I feel like 2 Fiery Cannonades, that's one of those cards, in the matches you're putting that in, you need it. You need to have it on turn 3. Because you're probably putting it in against tokens. And if you don't have it on turn 3, by the time you find it, you're going to be so far in the fucking tank that it may not matter anymore. I mean, I guess tokens does take a little bit of time to set up and really get its engine going. So maybe I'm overemphasizing the importance of that card. 2-of on Vraska's Contempt, I feel like that's fine, because chances are the threat you want to hit with that isn't going to come out until later in the game. And therefore, it's okay that you're not going to draw that until, halfway through your deck. Lost Legacy is another one that I feel like in matches where you want that card, you want to have it. But I don't think I would run more than 2. Because there are going to be times you hit that card and you're like, this is the last fucking thing I wanted. I mean, I know I put it in the deck for this match, but this is the last card I wanted to draw right now. Lost Legacy is almost like your Ixalan's Binding replacement from the Vampires deck. The unfortunate thing is you cannot hit Torrential Gearhulk with it, because that's an artifact, but you do have a Braid. So that definitely makes up for it. But, you know, being able to rip all the approaches out of an approach deck, all the Godfarer's Gift out of... Ooh, do you discard them or exile? Oh, you exile them, of course, because you get to go through the graveyard too. Ripping Godfarer's Gift out of Godfarer's Gift deck. Ripping Scarab God out of any deck that plays Scarab God. God, fuck that card. Hazarets, you know, whatever. Lost Legacy is pretty solid. I do question the 4 Duresses, and maybe I'm just not understanding why that card's as necessary as it is to try to hit it on turn 1. And maybe I'm overestimating the need for the draw capability off of Arguel's Bloodfast. And I have to look at that card. I think that may be one of those ones that specifically states you can only activate once per turn. And you do lose 2 life every time you draw a card, and Pirate's got 0 life gain. So, I don't know. But that's what I'm going to put together and run tomorrow night at F&M. That's the plan anyway, as long as nothing goes sideways. So, and it's not even that I think Pirates is a better deck than Vampires. It's just cheaper for me to put together right now. And until the meta, like, really kind of firms up, I don't want to sink a bunch of money into a deck that, you know, somebody's going to... Something at the top of the meta, it's just, like, impossible to win against. So that's where we're at there. Jody Keith, talking about the Team Open. And I actually, like, went back and scrubbed through the fucking Twitch footage to see the match he was talking about. Now, you all know I don't understand, like, anything about Legacy. I have never played it. I don't watch much coverage of it. I'm going to be playing it here soon with this X-Mage League. But I really, like... The reason I'm thinking about picking Elves is it's theoretically not a deck where it's like you have to identify what your opponent's playing by like turn 3 to make all the right choices. Elves just kind of does its thing. Maybe I should just play Legacy Storm. I mean, I'm probably not going to do well on the Legacy portion regardless. So... You know, I've always wanted to check out Storm, and Storm seems like one of those decks that just gives 0 fucks what it's playing against, and just does its thing, and hopes for the best. Sorry, Caleb, I know it's a little more complicated than that, but it seems to have very little concern about what it's playing against. The only thing is like, oh, you have a Leyline of Sanctity? Cool. Here's my Empty the Warrens. Anyway, so I don't really understand what's going in the match, and I don't even, like, really understand what's going on when he's talking about, you know, his experience there, except for a couple key points. Now, he talks about how his opponent's deck, I think that, I don't know, I listened to many Jody Keith story times today, so I think this is the match he was talking about, that his opponent's deck was mostly foreign cards, like Japanese cards. And y'all know how I feel about that. Though, to be fair, I didn't get a very good look at his opponent, but his opponent had the look of somebody that may be able to read those cards. Yes, I'm profiling, okay? I'm an asshole. His opponent appeared to be of descent from that area of the world. Now, I couldn't say, you know, like he's definitively descent from, you know, Japan, or Japanese ancestry, or Chinese, or, again, I didn't get a really good look at him because they were at the far end of the table from the side angle camera. But he talks about, like, during the one game, his opponent played a Blood Sun, and then Jody went to play a Tireless Tracker, and his opponent's like, no, you can't do that. You have no colored mana. And he was like, that's not how Blood Sun works. And he's just describing a few different clumsy or sloppy plays from his opponent. So by the time, the whole match is riding on him. His teammates are 1-1. Jim Davis won his match. Todd Stevens lost his. So in order to win the match, he has to win this game because they are on game 3. And I'm sure that's a high pressure situation, even more so in a team event, because your team wins or loses this round based on how this game comes out. And you could always pass the buck by saying, well, if my teammate who had lost would have won, then we wouldn't be in this position. But I'm sure when you're the last match going on and, which team wins is decided by that match, it's a lot of pressure. So towards the end, at one point, Jody calls a judge. And, the commentators, Patrick and Cedric, they don't really seem to know why he has called a judge, and he stepped away from the table to talk to the judge, and chat's hating on him. A couple people did correctly identify what had happened. He had a tax effect in play. I don't remember what it was, but he had something on the battlefield that caused spells to cost 1 extra, and his opponent tried to pay the actual casting cost for a spell. And this is why he called a judge. Now, a couple people correctly identified that. Other people are just going off on wild-ass tangents about it. And there are a lot of people implying that he's just being a salty fuck about it. Well, he was the last match covered. So the lead up to this wasn't known to the people watching the coverage. The reason he had finally said enough is enough and called a judge is because there had been several sloppy misplays on his opponent's part. To the point where it was looking less and less like mistakes. Now, this isn't how Jody put it. He's like, dude. But based on his description of the situation, it seems like one could believe that this is looking less and less like mistakes and sloppy play, and more like, well, what can I try to get away with, and what will you notice and what will you not? And this goes back to why it's important to call a judge when this shit happens. Because if this is intentional, and he is doing this a lot, that can be tracked and a pattern of behavior can be established. If nobody's calling a judge because it's like, oh, okay, he just fucked up. He just fucked up 17 times in our match. Then it looks more like a pattern. Even in that one match. But if you're like, oh, I don't want to call a judge. No, that's part of what judges are there for. And they're not going to issue a warning. They're going to do what they feel needs to be done in the situation. So, I mean, big thing, keep a level head if judge sides against you. You can appeal to the head judge. But, I don't know. This team was full of people I'd never heard of before. So they may have just been a more rookie team, like, excited to be in the big leagues. Because, you grind matches at the bottom end for so long, and then eventually, as your skill improves and whatever, and you get up there, you suddenly find yourself in, like, your first feature match ever, and you're like, oh, shit. And, can bring on nerves and everything. Like, in the Jim Davis standard match, his teammate actually pulled an illegal maneuver that the chat caught, but nobody else did, when he cast an negate off an Aether Hub and a Canyon Slew with no energy. But apparently Jim didn't catch that. So the point I'm basically getting to, for whatever it's worth, is people really need to stop bagging on the players in the coverage, like, oh, you're just trying to run the edge margins and get the judge to sanction so that you can pull a win out of a game you were otherwise going to lose, because you don't know the whole situation. You don't know what led up to that. This is like the match with Corey Baumeister that Matt Sperling was doing commentary on, and basically said that exact thing when his opponent, in the middle of him resolving a confiscation coup, drew a card, slammed down a glory bringer, and said, okay, I got the win. His opponent knew he had the win locked up and got overexcited. Corey had no clue what was going on. Even Marshall Sutcliffe, as this is happening, was like, whoa, wait a minute, what? And then you had Sperling. Well, now he's going to call the judge over and try to, have the judge make him shuffle away the glory bringer. No. The guy was playing things out of sequence, and it likely was legitimately Corey didn't understand why he thought he got to draw a card in the middle of confiscation coup resolving. Corey's turn was not done. It's one thing to flip a card around in your hand and flash it and say, just so you know, I got this. Which is a stupid thing to do, because if he had a mountain in his hand at Chandra's defeat, he would have known what he needed to do. But to miss sequence like that, even if it's not with ill intent, you can leave a player confused, and, you watch the chat rip him apart over that. And I think people need to, it's like armchair politicians or armchair quarterbacks, that, those are two fun terms to use, that it's like, well, this is exactly what they need to do. I get from your perspective, with the knowledge you have, that's what it looks like, but it's not always the whole story. But in any case, if you're ever bored and want to listen to some fun, albeit sweary story time, I totally recommend checking out Jody Keith's story times on his YouTube. If you look him up on Twitter, he links them out. Tomorrow I'll try to remember to grab his YouTube handle so that I can share that with you guys. Or maybe I'll try to link to in fact, the story time I have discussed here with this cast. I'm not sure yet. But anyway, I've been in my driveway for a couple minutes and now the dog's going nuts. So I gotta go. As always, if you made it this far with me, thank you very much for listening, and I'll talk to y'all tomorrow.